Hello all. We were discussing about the chapter control and coordination of class 10th Cbse. So this is the third video of the series. In the last video we were discussing about the structure of the neurons. Neurons are the structural and functional units of nervous system, and we discussed the types of neurons and a lot of other things, importance of the nervous system, and a lot of other things as well. Now today in this video we will be discussing as to how the neurons are connected to each other. Okay, are they really connected physically? I mean, do they actually come in touch with each other? That is what we are going to discuss first, and then we will be discussing as to how the message is actually transmitted between two neurons, and we will be introducing a new term which is synapse. We are going to discuss about synapse when we talk about the first topic, which is are the two neurons connected with each other. Then we will be discussing about the organs of the human nervous system and different type of nerves. Lastly, we will be discussing about the how the nervous system works. Now, if you see the coming to the first topic, which is how two neurons are connected. If you actually see, when we think about this, we feel that when a message comes here, when an electric impulse comes here, what happens? The dendrite accepts the electric impulse. We automatically feel that the dendrite should accept the electrical impulse, and then it should be transmitted to the cell body, and then what happens, the electrical impulse has to travel all the way to the axon, and then the electrical impulse has to travel to the axonite. Automatically it has to be transmitted to the next dendrite. So this has to physically be in touch for the transmission to occur, right? Only then, see, if you touch a hot object over here, then the impulse, the electrical impulse which is produced by the receptor, has to travel through the sensory neurons till the brain. So these two should be, the nerves should be physically in touch with each other. But the surprising fact is that they are not in physical touch. There is a small gap between the neurons. So if you see, there is a microscopic gap, and they are not physically in touch. They are not exactly touching each other. So one axonite will be in touch with dendrite of the next neuron. So the axonites will be linked to the dendrites of the next neuron. This is the next neuron, and they will be linked to the next dendrite of the next neuron by a small microscopic gap. This gap is very important. This gap has a name which is synapse. This junction is actually known as synapse, and gap exactly is known as a synaptic cleft, which you don't have to study. As of now, you can study that the gap is known as synapse. So what is the importance of synapse? You know what happens. So when an electrical impulse comes, it actually is accepted by the dendrite. Then what happens? The electrical impulse is carried to the cell body, and from the cell body it is carried away from the cell body through the axonite, and it reaches the axon, and it reaches the axonite. In the axonite, there are a lot of knobs. In these knobs, there are a lot of chemical substances. Lot of chemical substances are present in the axonite. Chemical substances. Okay, these, what happens to these chemical substances when the electrical impulse comes? When the electrical impulse comes, this knob breaks, and the chemical substances known as neurotransmitters are released into this particular gap. Okay, this neurotransmitters, they are received by the dendrite, and because of these neurotransmitters, another electric impulse is generated in these dendrite, which again sets off the electrical impulse into the cell body, and from there again into the axon. So here what happens? The neurotransmitters are the one who are setting off the electrical impulse in the next neuron. So they are not physically in touch, but then the neurotransmitters are released onto the gap, and the neurotransmitter sets off the electrical impulse onto the next dendrite of the next neuron. That is how the message is transmitted from one neuron to the next neuron. So if you see, what is the importance of the synapse? Why are they not physically in touch with each other? See, synapse ensures that the message is carried only in one direction. Otherwise, the message could have been carried the other way around as well, right? It can happen that the message is carried backwards as well. So this ensures that here in the dendrites you do not have neurotransmitters. So this stops, I mean, this acts like a one-way valve. Only through the axonite and through the neurotransmitters can the message pass. So you cannot pass the message the other way around, from the dendrite to the axonite and through the axon to the cell body. It cannot happen like that. So the presence of the neurotransmitters and presence of the synapse ensures that the message is carried only in one direction. Moreover, the neurons can quickly retain its original electrical state. Okay, so this also should be there. This electron would have been excited. This neuron would have been excited because of the incoming electrical impulse. When an electrical impulse comes, what happens? This neuron would be excited. That is, its electrical state would have changed. So once the neurotransmitter is released, we can ensure that this neuron goes back to its normal non-excited state. Okay, so these are the advantages of having a synapse. So because of the synapse, we can ensure that the message is carried only in one direction. Also, synapse can sometimes actually control the rate at which the message is transmitted. Also, the neurons can quickly go back to its non-excited state because of the synapse. Now we are coming to the next topic, which is organs of the human nervous system. So before that, let me tell you how exactly this transmission happens. See, when a light comes, what happens? The receptor receives the stimulus. In the receptor, some chemical reaction is set off. Now, because of this chemical reaction, an electrical impulse is generated. This chemical reaction will set off an electrical impulse, and this electrical impulse is received by the dendrite of the first neuron. Which will be the neuron? Because from eyes it has to go to the brain, right? So it will be a sensory nerve, right? So the chemical impulse which is generated, the electrical impulse which is generated will go to the dendrite of the sensory nerve. From the dendrite, it travels to the cell body, and through the axon, it travels to the axonite. And then what happens from the axonite? In the synapse, what happens? The neurotransmitters or the chemicals are released, which in turn sets off the electrical impulse in the dendrite of the second neuron. And that is how this transmission occurs till the sensation, that is the stimulus of light, reaches the brain. Okay, this is exactly how the message is transmitted to the brain or the spinal cord. Now coming to the next topic, which is the organs of the nervous system. So what are the organs of the nervous system? So we can say that we can say that the sense organs, that is eyes, ears, nose, all these things are part of the nervous system, but they are not very, of course, they help in the functioning of the nervous system, but most important parts of the nervous system can be told to be brain, spinal cord, and what else are there? Most important ones, nerves. So brain, spinal cord, and nerves are the most important part of the nervous system. We can also say that our sense organs, that is eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, are also part of the nervous system. If you see, brain is located inside a skull, and spinal cord actually is like a continuation of the brain, which is placed inside the vertebral column. And we can see that the nerves arise from both brain and the spinal cord. So nerves actually arise from both brain and spinal cord and travel throughout the body. So based on from where the nerves are arising, nerves can be classified into, if they are starting from brain, they are known as cranial nerves. If they start from spinal cord, they are known as spinal nerves. Okay, so all the sense organs, in fact all parts of our body are connected by millions of nerves. There are mainly two types of nerves, which is a cranial, based on from where they are starting or from where they go to. Okay, from where they are starting or from where they go to, there are two types of nerves, which is cranial nerves. If they are starting from if the nerves are basically connected to the brain, so if they are starting from the brain or connect or going to the brain, that is, if they are connected to the brain, they are known as cranial nerves. But then if they are connected to the spinal cord, they are known as spinal nerves. So basically spinal nerves connect all parts of the body like muscle, skin, I mean almost all part of the body to the spinal cord, except for except for the spinal nerves directly do not link to the brain. Except for that, it connects the rest, it connects to the rest of the body. So there is also a third type of special type of spinal nerves, which is visceral nerves. Visceral nerves means these are special type of nerves which connect the internal organs to the spinal cord. And internal organs, visceral nerves connect the internal organs to spinal cord, and some of the visceral nerves connect the internal organs to the brain as well. Okay, so in general we can say that cranial nerves, spinal nerves and visceral nerves are different type of nerves. Now based on with what they are made up of, with what kind of neurons they are made up of, kind of neurons, they are divided into sensory nerves, so sensory nerves, motor nerves and mixed nerves, right? Sensory nerves are obviously made up of sensory neurons, that is, they transmit information from various sense organs and various parts of the body to the spinal cord or the brain. Motor neurons means they transmit messages from the brain and spinal cord to various effectors, that is various parts of the body. Effector can be a muscle or a hormonal system, glands or anything. And mixed nerves contain both sensory neurons and motor neurons. So nerves, based on from where they are starting or from where they are going to, I mean to where they are going to, it can be divided to cranial nerves and spinal nerves. And based on what kind of neurons they are made up of, they are divided into sensory nerves, motor nerves and mixed nerves. So how does the nervous system work? Now basically when some stimulus comes to the sense organ, the message is transmitted to the receptor as a chemical change, and this chemical change sets off an electrical impulse, and through the sensory neurons it is transmitted to the brain or the spinal cord, and in most cases it is going to be the brain unless it is a reflex action. So the brain will analyze what message has arrived, and appropriate action is taken. Now the brain will send out instructions to the muscles or the glands, and through what the brain will send out the messages to the motor nerves. Then what will happen? The concerned parts are going to act according to the instruction of the brain. So in case of very complicated responses, both spinal cord and brain, both of them work together if some complicated responses are required. So that is how the nervous system works. Okay, so that is it regarding the the nervous system, types of nervous system, importance of synapse and how the nervous system works. Now we are going to look at the parts of the nervous system in the next video.